think there's a family power struggle at NeverLand Ranch because boy Kavalier's dad has been hiding in plain sight all along.
What?
Welcome back to ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things that you might have missed in Alien Earth Episode 7, Emergence. And boy, what an emergence it was. So the title of this episode refers to the new threats that we see emerge, like Utani's invasion of Neverland, Arthur's Chestburster, and even a new terrestrial Xeno variant, but also there is an emergence of truth, particularly the truth about the extent of Prodigy's control, the limited choices they have within them, and what makes us who we are. A little bit later in the video, I'll tell you guys about some awesome new merch that we have designed for our merch store and some new details about our live show at Comic-Con in New York City in just a few weeks. So this intro returns us to the classic Xenomorph close-ups that we were used to, splicing in a few shots from the last episode with some new context. We see the camera pan from the Xenomorph body as the flashes of the fly's nest from last episode appear over them before seeing a split-second flash of Toodle's body and the Occelus standing over him, outside of his cage, rather than inside the cage next to him as we ended on in the last episode, which makes these flashbacks feel more like dreams rather than a direct retelling of what happened last time. The same thing happened last week when we got a small snippet of the first Xenomorph that was dissected in the lab on a specialized plastic tray, which we actually see later this episode. So the intro finishes on the Xenomorph's tail, which of course it uses later in the episode before we turn to Slightly, who's posted up next to Arthur's body, turning him literally into the monster under his bed. Next to him is his chosen stuffed animal, a white tiger, which is fitting. See, white tigers are often used as a symbol for a predator hiding in plain sight, which is exactly what he has become at this point. Not because he is a tiger himself, but because he is being guided by one. We also see how little Slightly actually understands about the Xenomorphs when he tries to feed Arthur with the facehugger still attached, but his body rejects it because it can't get past his proboscis. Because after a facehugger attaches to a host, it sticks the proboscis down its throat to implant not only the Xeno embryo, but also to provide the host with oxygen and nutrients while it incubates.
Circle of life.
In this case, there was no room for extra food, which is why Arthur couldn't keep it down.
Oh, hey, are you guys still selling gum?
Actually, no, we despise gum here and we will never sell it.
Oh man, I need that gum real bad. See, I got this bad habit that I'm trying to quit and, well, I gotta try something.
Oh, I see. You're on the gum. Yeah, I know exactly how you feel actually. I have this really bad oral fixation habit because of anxiety. And every time I tried to quit, I would end up doing this weird thing where I'd clench my jaw and I'd squish my face. But like I said, I hate gum and I found another way to change my habit. In fact, I think you should try this. It's called Fume Zero. So this is a single-use flavored air device with zero vapor and zero batteries. It is not a vape, it is something totally different. There's no smoke, no charging, just pure flavored air and a satisfying fidget feel. And get this, it is just $24.99, which is probably a lot cheaper than the bad habit you're trying to change.
Wow, that's a good bargain.
Now this flavor is called Crisp Mint, and it tastes a lot better than the disgusting sugar rubber that you came in here to buy. And it's designed to be simple. Pick it up, draw it in, and taste. No setup, no recharging. See, Fume Zero is perfect for oral fixation, fidgeting, or anxiety, and it has this really fun chewable mouthpiece.
That's my favorite part.
And you can choose from 6 flavors: Crisp Mint, Peach Blush, Raspberry, Mango, Orange Vanilla, Spearmint Ice, and each one delivers more than 10 days of peak flavor. And because it's just $24.99, it's easy to try and see if Fume works for you. Fume has already helped more than 500,000 people make their change, and Zero is their most accessible option yet. So I highly recommend you try flavored air as a satisfying, affordable alternative to change your lifestyle. Zero vapor, just natural flavor and a better habit to reach for. You can try it now at tryfume.com/product/fume0 or scan this QR code or click the link below. Now back to what I was saying. Above his bed once again is the statue of the 3 wise monkeys, a metaphor we have seen the show play with all season, and this episode is no exception. Slightly is an Iwazuru, the monkey who speaks no evil, like Kirsh, but only because he has no choice. He has evil whispering in his ear and watching through his eyes at all times. Now when Smee walks in and finds a slightly less than metaphorical monster under the bed, he shows how he's one of the most loyal members of the Lost Boys by agreeing to help Slightly, taking after his Neverland namesake, who was Captain Hook's most loyal man. Now Smee only agrees to help after Slightly reassures him, which he does, saying,
He said he just sees the monster. Once he has it, he let out the go.
Which isn't necessarily something the Morrow said, but it isn't something he didn't say either.
And the thing on the person's face is gonna fall off. And they're gonna wake
wake up.
The sirens are going off as Kirsh heads down the hallway to check at the lab, giving us an eerie mirror of similar scenes during the Xenos' escape on the Mazzio, but they're only going off in some regions of the facility. For example, they don't sound in the Lost Boys' rooms or anywhere near them, showing how they want to keep the kids in the dark and well outside of danger, as we see reinforced later. As Kirsh arrives at the lab, he finds himself on the other side of the glass for the first time, due to the fly's unique taste. Kirsh explains how these flies eat.
They digest their food outside their bodies. Organic matter must have been scarce in their world, so they eat mostly minerals.
Now, this is the same way that flies eat in real life, by spraying digestive enzymes to liquefy their food source, and then they drink it through the straw in their nose, just like we saw our synthetic slurping friends do last episode. Now, the guards use a specific kind of containment tube to capture the flies, which looks a lot like a Kantano from Star Wars. This was an ice cream machine that someone decided to run around with in the background of The Empire Strikes Back that developed into a canonized cult following, and then was canonized as a safe in The Mandalorian. But more importantly, it's the same container we see used later when Prodigy secures the Chestburster. After Boy dismisses Kirsh's science lesson, he asks if Toodles can be fixed, to which Kirsh replies with,
Conceptually, it's possible. Practically, we haven't cracked it.
which is a fancy way of saying, I don't know. And then he has the audacity to tell Boy that Toodles' death was intentional before blaming it on the Occelus, leaving out that he was watching Toodles the whole time. Now, what he chooses to reveal here is interesting since he's quiet about so much, and the distraction works as Boy seems completely fascinated with the eye's intelligence. Kirsh tries to dismiss it, saying,
Most animals know cause and effect to some degree.
because he knows that whatever he says, Boy Kavalier is going to do the opposite. Again, this feeds into our Kirsh theory that I'm going to talk about a little later in the video. As Wendy walks into the lab, she's literally confronted with her own mortality, or at least Toodles' mortality, and she immediately recognizes she is not nearly as immortal as Prodigy had told her. We also see just how unprepared Boy is for a situation like this. Up until now, he's felt like he was in complete control, but with Wendy coming to her senses, he is just as ill-equipped as Slightly is with Arthur. We get our first glimpse of this when he says,
I don't want to scare everyone to get an idea in their head. Oh my god, we're not safe. And tell me there's no talking to him.
We're not safe.
which shows not only how nervous he is tripping over his words, but how much faster Wendy is catching up to him intellectually. She's not buying his BS anymore, but she still hones in on the most important parts. When she tries to leave and Boy won't let her, we see her flex just how strong her connection is with the Xenomorph, commanding it to bash its head against the side of the cage, the same way the Xeno broke through into the control room of the Mazzio. Now this confirms that Wendy isn't just communicating with the Xenomorphs, they obey her commands, almost as if she is their queen. Wendy's role here was not only a synthetic hybrid, but also a hybrid between Xenomorphs and humans, just like the cloned Ripley ate in Alien Resurrection. Now the Xenomorph itself also looks distinctly different from the one that we saw on the Nostromo or the Mazzio. It's brown rather than black, and the skin on the front of its head looks like it's cracked and peeling, almost as if it's a snake shedding its final layer of skin and teasing its final emergence later, calling back to the episode's title, Emergence. She leaves them with,
You can't just erase things.
which is not only directly calling out what Boy did to Nibs, but more specifically calling out his attempt to erase the consequences of Isaac's death as well. The show does an excellent job of showing how emotions are human when Kirsh discovers that the trackers are off and we see Boy's reaction. Wendy really takes after her namesake when she finally catches up with her brother and they make the plan to escape, but she refuses to do so without the rest of the Lost Boys. Just like Wendy and Peter Pan, she sees them as family, and maybe even more so than Joe after the end of the episode. However, when she goes to pick up Nibs, she's met by Curly, who still seems to be Prodigy's biggest bootlicker. Not only is she aware of everything that's happening to Nibs, but she's already justified it as the right thing to do. Nibs is clearly losing it and has grown unreasonably attached to the doll that she took from Dame, just like Newt was with her doll in Aliens. And Nibs should not even remember getting this doll in the first place. It was given to her before her last memory wipe. Like Curly, she has convinced herself that it never happened, confiding in Mr. Strawberry.
What's ours is ours, nobody can take it.
Which seems to play off an old JFK quote, "We cannot negotiate with people who say what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours is negotiable." Now he used that in a 1961 TV address about the Berlin crisis. So she sounds like she is a complete mess after Dame's reboot, and we see her continue to spiral downwards throughout the episode. Curly tries to point the blame on Wendy for getting them into this mess in the first place, and she has a point. If Wendy hadn't been so cavalier on debuting the Lost Boys rescue crew, Nibs wouldn't have been scarred in the first place. Wendy's done enough growing up these past few episodes to recognize the reality of the situation. The mere idea that they could actually die freaks Nibs out even more, especially when she says,
We're all gonna die here, and then the bugs will crawl in and we'll all be ghosts.
I don't want to be a ghost.
Which is not only some heavy foreshadowing for her untimely demise that we see later on, but it's also something that wasn't possible given their synthetic bodies don't rot and couldn't become bug food. But the introduction of the fly's unique diet has changed everything. And speaking of adorable pets, you gotta see these new designs that we just dropped at our merch store. I am so proud of these. We have the Xeno's breakfast cereal, in space no one can hear you eat, this poster for the Mazzio Zoos featuring the T Occelus, and my new personal favorite, the Aliens 2 parody Nintendo game cartridge recreating this epic scene. And of course, we still have the fan favorite Jazzy Chestburster straight out of Spaceballs.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, my ragtime gal.
In ScreenCrush, I am so excited to meet you guys at our live show next month in
New York City.
We're going to meet you live and in person for a night of exclusive breakdowns, comedy, and really just a chance to nerd out together during New York Comic Con. Tickets are going fast, and the link for all of that stuff is below. It's going to be so much fun. So thanks for listening to our plugs. Those are done now. Back to the episode. So Wendy creates a distraction by releasing the Xeno from the lab, which gives us a glimpse of the lab they were dissecting the Xenomorph from the Nostromo in. Now this is the same lab that we saw teased in the opening of last episode. As we said in last week's breakdown, the tray containing the Xenomorph's body parts is made of plastic, unlike the rest of the lab, so the acid doesn't burn through. But it also looks like they didn't get all of it, as they're clearly cleaning up a leak when the Xeno breaks loose. The attention to detail in this whole series is incredible, and we see a great example of that here. Just before the cage opens, we see the images on screen next to it bending like they do when Wendy hacks into them. As the Xenomorph breaks loose, we see the carnage unfold both on screen and up close, mirroring one of the first encounters with the Xenomorphs in Cameron's Aliens. Then we turn to Dame Sylvia, who is reminiscing with a digital picture of her husband that swipes and moves around like pictures on an iPhone. After Boy comes in and chews her out, he yells at Kirk,
Be useful.
which is a bit of a projection from Boy given how helpless he feels right now. However, Kersh does end up taking his suggestion when he helps Slightly and Smee escape with Arthur's unconscious body.
Well, yeah, why did he do that when he just turned him in later?
Well, it's a bit weird, but Doug, clearly Kirsh is using them to bait and catch Morrow, as we see later. It was clearly the winning play. We see once again his wise monkey coping style when he both sees and hears the evil Slightly is about to commit, but refuses to tell the authorities, and instead shows them the way. As they escaped into the jungle, we get this panning overhead shot where we can see skyscrapers in the background, which shows just how close Neverland is to the prodigy city, New Siam. On the woods, we refocus back on Wendy, Joe, and Nibs, who go through a mini existential crisis when they stumble on their own graves. Now this is by far the most visual reminder they have yet that they aren't really the people that they used to be. They're not only confronting their own mortality, but their metaphorical mortality as well. Wendy makes that clear when she says,
It's not us. We're still here.
and Nibs responds with,
I don't think I am anymore.
showing that her reboot took away more than just her memories, but a part of who she is as well, which seems to be one of the core questions this show is asking. Are we who we are now, or are we defined by the collection of our memories? What makes us us, and what makes us human? And that's echoed in the next scene with the other trio lost in the woods. After they dodge the patrol, Slightly and Smee get jump scared by the facehugger from above, just like Ripley was aboard the Nostromo. They immediately start screaming, which should have been more than enough to get the patrol's attention, but that's a plot hole for another day. Arthur is back on his feet, and he has no idea how he really got there or how anything happened, just like Kane did after his run-in with the facehugger aboard the Nostromo.
Well, yeah, but how can you forget something that big? That was pretty traumatizing, right?
Well, it's a side effect of the toxins the facehugger uses to knock out the prey before incubation, which have a similar effect to anesthetics used to sedate people for surgery. Without his memories, Arthur has no idea how much danger he's in, and even initially thanks Slightly and Smee for saving him, despite actively doing the exact opposite. But as he comes back around, we see more of the person than he truly is, as he starts to catch on to the fact that they're lying to him. But instead of recognizing the threat, he acts like the father figure that he's always been. Now, as they're walking along the beach, they notice the water behind them doesn't move during a large portion of the scene, which could mean a lot of things. It could be foreshadowing how they're not really moving toward anything, but rather just waiting for the inevitable. Or it could be a metaphorical parallel to standing water, which is known to be a breeding ground for harmful parasitic bacteria, just like the harmful parasite that's growing inside of Arthur. Or it could just be a weird background mistake they missed in post, but either way, it looks really weird, and it's one of those things that once you see it, you can't really unsee it. Arthur tries to empathize and reason with the boys, showing how much he cares just before the Chestburster interrupts this touching moment.
Surprise, mother.
And this shows once again how the show always punishes people who try to do the right thing. The same could also be said for everyone in the group as well. Smee didn't ask for any of this, both of them just want to help a friend, but as the Chestburster escapes, they realize the price they paid for it. Now, by losing the specimen, Slightly has put his family at risk, while Smee is now haunted by the fact that he helped hurt someone, which is clearly something that he never wanted to do. Both of these kids are rapidly growing up, and they're seeing the world for what it is rather than through the eyes of a child. And we know that that is not allowed in Neverland. The #1 rule is you are not allowed to grow up. But before we can get into that, we see that Curly is having a really hard time keeping Wendy's secret, and she seeks out Dame Sylvia for some comfort. She even calls Dame
Mom.
showing just how prodigy-pilled she is and that she's bought completely into their narrative.
But I don't get it. I thought she didn't have emotions, but she seems like she's pretty emotional to me.
Well, yeah, dude, but remember, the hybrids do have some programmed emotions, but they're all completely artificial. And we see the signs of that here. She looks like she's about to cry, but she doesn't actually shed any tears. Everything she's going through is an artificial reaction that a child would have. Curly finds Dame in her office sleeping on a chair, presumably because she doesn't want to go home and confront her husband. Now, she tries to comfort Curly, promising that
It'll be okay.
and at this point, Curly might be the only one who would believe her. We then cut back to Slightly and Smee, who have managed to strap together a makeshift raft, out of nowhere in remarkable time, to float Arthur's body down the river. So we get some heavy foreshadowing. As the still waters get rougher, the closer they get to the rendezvous point, where we can see an amphibious Utani task force emerge from the water like Navy SEALs. They are decked out head to toe in equipment that we have seen across the Alien franchise, including Cameron's iconic M41A pulse rifle with the ammo displayed on the side, and also they have a variant of the M56 Smart Gun, a heavy machine gun that's so big it uses a hydraulic arm to stabilize it. They also all wear some kind of balaclava that covers their face, which is handy for not only keeping a low profile, but also protects them from playing tonsil hockey with the facehugger themselves. Slightly tries to plead with Morrow, telling him,
I tried. I did everything you asked me to.
which is objectively true, but Morrow reminds him the price of growing up, despite there no longer being a need for his weird predatory paternal relationship with him. But once again, this is yet another example of a character being punished despite doing everything right, with the most prominent example being Arthur, who the camera lingers on as we transition to the next scene, which opens on the Occelus infected lamb. As Adam says,
The Xenomorph exited the facility through a waste pipe.
now the close-up of the lamb's face and the way he reacts is like we're watching some kind of twisted BBC nature documentary for a second, which is fitting given Adrian Edmondson narrated several episodes of Natural World on BBC. Boy, however, is way too preoccupied with his new toy and decides to test its intelligence by asking it about pi.
Do sheeps like to eat pie?
Not that kind of pi. Pi, the number, or
It's the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter.
However, you're not entirely wrong, since it's clearly a pun on the design of the Occelus's eye, which looks like it's been cut into slices of a pie. Now, pi is what's called an irrational number, which means that its decimal representation is an endless sequence of numbers, which is why Boy asked the creature to give it the next 3 numbers. The creature does so by stomping its feet in accordance with the number, but when it gets to the 3rd number, 9, he drops a deuce instead, which seems like a crude joke, but connecting the number 9 to feces is actually a reference to your mom. So this shows that the eye is not only self-aware, but that it's capable of solving complex equations beyond even what its host is capable of. And Boy nearly cries tears of joy when he discovers this despite all the chaos actively around him. Remember, Boy's #1 goal here was always to find somebody he could have a conversation with. He said that he invented the hybrids simply to have somebody meet him at his level of intelligence, and now he's met an intelligent alien life form. So he immediately suggests attaching the eye to a human host so they can talk, without even hesitating at the cost of life, suggesting they use,
You know, someone who talks and uses a toilet. One of the scientists, maybe? No, a mold scrubber. You know, someone with a low IQ.
which finally gives us an explanation for what the weird hazmat suit guys have been doing this whole time. They were spraying for mold because everything in this universe is always dripping wet.
Everything's wet. Why is everything so wet? Everything's wet.
And then we turn back to Wendy and Joe and Nibs, who stumble upon some kind of abandoned crane in the woods, which looks like a primitive human replica of the space jockey's helm on LV-266. Now we can't really tell what it is, but it does confirm that Neverland Ranch was built on top of an existing facility. The crew gets ambushed by the Marines and Wendy gives them a warning. At first, it seems like Nibs is growling at them, but if you listen closely, you can actually hear the Xeno chime in first. when Wendy gives the signal, we finally get the scene that we've wanted from this series. Seriously, this is the first thing you think of when you hear the title Alien Earth. Xenomorphs jumping from the trees, taking people out in broad daylight. The lighting also gives us a much better look at how it's adapted to its environment. The lab-grown Xeno's brownish hue allows it to blend in better with the trees. Just like the Xenos in space, we're able to blend into the ship's darker network of cables. Its skull is also translucent, which is a nod to the original design for the top of the creature's head. It was supposed to be semi-transparent, with empty eye sockets of human appearance visible within. The two-tone design is also reminiscent of a specific variant called the Defenders from the 1994 Predator vs. Alien arcade game. These were a really aggressive variant that would smash their enemies, as the name implies, and they were sometimes depicted with shorter dorsal fins, just like the one here. Its drool is also brown, which means that it's infested with toxic bacteria like a Komodo dragon. They mix their bacteria-infested saliva with a dash of venom to create an anticoagulant that immobilizes their prey. Or this could just be a special variant capable of spitting acid like the spitters in alien colonial marines. Either way, this is the first time we have seen the Xenomorphs fully utilized as a biological weapon, the very thing that Weyland Utani and the others have been trying to do throughout the franchise. Then things really come to a head as Utani's forces finally manage to make it inside the facility, only to get ambushed by Kirsh, who is watching their every move through Slightly's POV cam. He shows how this was all just a game to him when he says,
"Nobody likes a sore loser."
and Morrow almost smiles back in respect. Now, as they exit, Kirsh tells the boys they're grounded, which is ironic given that he clearly helped them do exactly what they were punished for. But it's also weird that he maintains this oddly paternal relationship with them despite how they've grown up this episode. He's clearly not done with them, just like he isn't finished with Morrow. And this paternal leaning of his leads us into a theory that we're going to talk about later on. Finally, Wendy, Joe, and Nibs arrive at the boat, and if you look closely, you can see the set is actually counting down to their moment of confrontation. It starts with 03 written on the boat dock, and then 02 on the door of the boat, until finally, Siberian and Joe's old crew pop out, all wearing TR1 on their chests. Siberian gives her an "I told you so" speech when Nibs starts to lose it, and after pulling off a Mortal Kombat worthy fatality, she gets taken out by a few rounds from Siberian and a fatal shock from Joe, which does not go over well with Wendy. After Nibs dies, we can hear her make the same distorted sound that Ash made when he was dying aboard the Nostromo. Now, as Wendy wraps her head around what just happened, the episode closes out with the Song of the Dead by Queens of the Stone Age. So the song carries a dark message about choosing death as an end of suffering and embracing death as an alternative to life without hope, which ironically puts a much more positive spin on the many casualties we see in this episode. As we said before, the most selfless people in Prodigy were the ones who are punished the most. Arthur, Slightly, Smee, Nibs, all of them face drastic consequences simply for trying to do the right thing. And the few who didn't make it, at least, are no longer trapped in this cycle. It's also some pretty bleak foreshadowing for what Wendy's possible reaction could be, especially with her pet Xeno hiding in the bushes nearby. Now, last week, I threw out a theory that Boy Kavalier could already be a hybrid. Now, that theory was wrong and dumb because we do see that egg opening when he approaches it. I still think he's definitely trying to be a hybrid himself one day, but what if Kersh is actually the first hybrid, or at least a prototype? Now, the reason I think this is because of the lies and weird power plays he does against Boy Kavalier. Synthetics typically are programmed to obey the company at all costs, but he is different.
Well, so who is he?
Well, it was implied in a past episode that Boy killed his dad. But what if he did kill his dad, but then he transferred his mind into an android body? This would be punishment for him to now have to eternally obey his son. And after all, Boy is constructing a Peter Pan fantasy, and he could have envisioned Kirsh as his Captain Hook. But that's everything we found in this episode. What did you guys think? Any crazy predictions for the finale? And if you enjoyed the video, be sure to let us know on comments or Twitter or threads and all that other stuff. And if you hated it, go yell at Dodd. He wrote the script. You can find his socials in the description below. And if it's your first time here, welcome to the channel. Please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. And for ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.